This one, the importance of development for children with developmental disabilities. So this is saying that although a child with developmental disabilities may face impairments, they still develop. And although we may talk about quote-unquote normal and typical development, actually a child with developmental disabilities does have normal development. They go through certain milestones, and with the right support they can reach their potential. They may have certain impairments, but they still experience child development, and they need to be supported in their social development, in their emotional development. And although even if they have cognitive impairments, we need to help them reach their potential with that development. So we move on from there. So this really, then we're going to start talking about, okay, why do developmental disabilities matter to children and their families? How do they impact and impair a child, and how do they impact a family's life and their life? And start touching upon the idea, which we'll come to in a minute, of how does society play a role in that? So if we move on a couple more. So again, these often will, as we're doing in our course, we'll often give as is the case here, we're giving information here, so we're giving the information on the impact, on the impairment. And then this next one, it's going to be a chance, again, for learners to discuss. So we're going to, again, not spoon feed them information, but just say, return to our case study characters. Okay, how having learnt about impact, how now do you think that impact will affect these specific examples, to really get them learning? And again, we're going to get another animated video of some of our case study children saying, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a politician, and really getting a sense across the idea that there's no reason why a child with cerebral palsy cannot go on to be a doctor. It's how we support them, help them reach their potential, and as society do not impair. So if we move on a couple more. Okay, so here's now where we start talking a little bit more in detail about the idea of the biopsychosocial model of disability, which we touched upon in our last course, and really we're getting to the crux of, yes, there may be impairments, but also it's society impairing. It's across both of those aspects. A child is impaired by their condition, but that is exacerbated or increased by society impairing through no access, stigma, etc. And actually, if it works, I've got a brief video which we're going to use in our course, highlighting that a little more. So if we move on one more, and let's see if this will work. Here we go. So this is going to be a short video we're going to use in our course. And it's actually by one of our co-lead educators. So we have two lead educators. We've got Hannah, who's going to be one of our lead educators, and we've also got Tom Shakespeare, who himself has a disability, and he's part of our team, and he's going to, I think, sorry, it's back on. Hello. So, and this, you may have actually seen this, because this was in our last course, but I just wanted to show it again, because I thought it was a great video, just to give you a sense of the kind of thing that you may want to use in your own course, and that we can translate. So I thought it would just be a great thing to run through quickly.
So the social model of disability has been called the big idea of the disability movement. It came about back in the 1970s. A group of disability activists in Britain coming together to discuss their experience and the difficulties they faced. And their revolutionary idea was that people were disabled by society, not by their bodies or minds. So they made a distinction between impairment, that is to say the health condition, and disability, which for them was the disadvantage, the oppression, the exclusion, the discrimination, the prejudice. So people are disabled by barriers. That might be environmental barriers, no lift, too many stairs. It might be information barriers, no braille, no voiceover, no sign language. It may be attitudinal barriers. We don't want people like you, you're not welcome, the whole prejudice and stigma. And so UPIAS, the Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation, and the other organizations said we must remove those barriers. We don't fix the individual, we don't worry about that. We try and remove the barriers so people are enabled. And the wave of disability discrimination legislation, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Disability Discrimination Act, and even the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities are all about that, removing the barriers. And this is a global issue. It started in the UK, but it was taken up by Disabled Peoples International in 1981. And everywhere I go, in Africa or Asia, you hear people say, look, the prejudice disables me, the lack of provision disables me, my lack of a wheelchair disables me. My difference is okay, the way that you exclude me is not. Now that was revolutionary. It built a movement. It identified what needed to be changed, and it inspired individuals to be proud, angry, not ashamed, and thinking that they were at fault. But academics and people with lived experience began to say, hang on a minute, my pain, my physical or mental health problems, they're also an issue. It's not just the way I'm treated. And folk began to think about people are disabled by society and by our bodies. We need a middle way, if you like, between what's been known as the medical model and the social model. Because disability is very complex. It's multifactorial. It's the pain I feel, it's the paraplegia I've got, as well as the lack of access I have. And so we're kind of thinking in a laminated way, the different layers of this multifactorial experience. The biological level, the medical level, psychological level, really important, emotions and so forth. The architectural level, can I get in the building? The provision, the sign language, the social stigma and discrimination, will I get a job? Are you going to let me in? Are you prejudiced against me? The legal rights I have, the cultural representations in society. How do we think of disabled people? So all of these are important. We can't reduce everything to the medical, of course not. But neither can we reduce everything to the social. It's about all of these things. We can intervene in different ways at different levels. Self-help groups, counselling, barrier removal, perhaps healthcare, medical care, prevention, legal rights. None of them on their own are enough. We need them all. And that way we can try and make the lives of disabled people better, which is what we're all about. But we need to do so in a way that doesn't say it's wrong to be disabled. Disabled is part of life. We face many barriers. We can do something about it.
So that gives us really just a sense of the kind of content we're going to be creating and have started creating. And if we move on there, so that ends our week one, really. It's talking about disability more generally. Not just children with developmental disability, but getting learners to understand that this is an issue that affects right up to adults, and getting to understand the broader framework we're working within. So then if we move on to week two, I'll just quickly, so we're going to talk about, I think this is also in your course, diagnosis. And through this, we want to hear both from us as educators, but also we're going to hear from parents and healthcare professionals about parents, their experiences, what went well, what went badly, what they would have wanted to be improved when being told quite distressing news. And then healthcare professionals, what has worked for them in their setting? So healthcare professionals, we have interviewed, as with parents, we've interviewed maybe 10 healthcare professionals already, from the UK, from India, from Zimbabwe, from Thailand, really giving those different perspectives that if you're a learner, you can then think, okay, I never would have thought of that in my setting, but that can work and that can be adapted for my context. So if we move on a couple more. So this is, again, this is talking about the diagnosis. And one more. And then, so diagnosis then moves on to early intervention and the importance of early intervention to help a child reach their potential. And then what does early intervention involve? What does it include? What are some examples of that? And we've got, I don't know if you know of Melissa Gladstone, but she's been doing some wonderful work in this region, in Malawi predominantly, looking at early intervention, and she's going to be helping us create that content. So we move on again. So then when we're talking about healthcare, there's two streams to healthcare. There's the specialist healthcare needs, which is what we're going to start by talking about. Needs very specific to, say, cerebral palsy, might be physiotherapy, might be occupational therapy, very specific to the impairment. But later we'll also talk about the general needs. So children with developmental disabilities, as with all children, are going to get ill, they're going to get sick, and then they need to access normal services, dentistry, maybe chest infections, whatever it is, they need to be able to access the service. So how do you then accommodate a child that may have an intellectual impairment that cannot understand the information you are describing? How do you then make that accessible to them? So we're going to start off here by the specialist. And tagged onto that, we're going to talk about assistive technologies. So this could be hearing aids. This could be as simple as a simple stroller for a child with cerebral palsy. It could be a communication device for someone with an intellectual disability, maybe some simple picture, easy read device instead of a block of information, braille, etc. And then, as I mentioned, we'll talk about the general healthcare needs. So if we can move on one more. And again, so we're coming back here to the case studies. We want to revisit our case study characters and talk about their healthcare needs. And then this is a really important one here, actually. So we want to talk about the transition of healthcare through as a child ages. So there's often something people call the pediatric cliff. So a child leaves their pediatrician, their child service, and they go to an adult service where they perhaps don't know their history, they don't know them as an individual, and suddenly all of these barriers that may have been removed over a child's life are suddenly put up again. And so it's how do you, as a learner on this course, we want to get them thinking, how do you connect with other services to ensure that that is not going to be an issue as a child ages? An early developmental pediatrician is going to be giving very different advice, treatment, intervention to a child that is maybe 14. And then you're thinking of other things that come in through adolescence, menstrual hygiene management, these kind of issues. So it's working with other services to help the individuals know about that child as an individual and their needs, their aspirations, their past history, etc. So that's a really, really important bit for us. And then thinking into adulthood. This is a course for children, but we don't want that to stop as a child reaches 18. We don't want learners on this course to suddenly think their duty is done. It's really thinking, how do you then help them manage their own healthcare as well? Maybe they're going to start living independently. outside of the family home? How do they manage their own healthcare? How do you, as a healthcare professional, help them do this? So we move on a couple more. So then we go into accessing healthcare. And this is, as you know, this could be architectural, information, etc. So it's then discussing those aspects and how we can improve upon them and how we can remove those barriers. And again, we're going to be talking to parents and healthcare professionals about this to hear their views. So we can move on to the next one. And again, sorry. So yeah, so we're talking to healthcare professionals, and again, we're getting them to discuss these videos. We want them to discuss the videos and think, okay, these are healthcare professionals all around the world saying this is how they've removed barriers to access. How can now we do it in our setting? And this one, these last 2 points here, so this is again talking about that idea of a network approach to service provision. It's not just an isolated, your service is all you're thinking about, all you're dealing with. If a child has needs perhaps to do with their teeth, need a dentist, they may come to you initially and you may be the one to refer them on, but how are you going to do that? How are you going to work as a network to provide that better level of care? And then getting to think who is in your network. If you've got no idea who's in your network and who you're referring to, how do you change that? How do you create this way of working that is not isolating, not also confusing for parents and children who may have to be jumping across 5 different services? How do you work together to make that a seamless, easy process for them? And then so we end week 2 with communication. And really, as a healthcare professional, how can you effectively communicate and build a trusting partnership? It's a two-way street. It's not you purely giving information. You've got to be listening to the parents, understanding their context for their child. And so really, we're going to have quite a few steps, 3 or 4 steps, discussing communication in quite a lot of detail. And actually, I think if we move on, I've got a couple of other videos of parents, actually, that we've interviewed that I thought would be, just to give you an idea of the kind of videos we'll be creating. So these will create 5 or 6 parents around the world talking about these issues. So the first one here is Sheila Hollins. She actually is both a healthcare professional and a parent. Her son Nigel has quite a severe intellectual disability, but she's also a psychiatrist focused on the mental health of individuals with intellectual disability. And so she gave a wonderful interview, and I thought this was a really great comment from her and something we would look to include.
Soon after the meeting started, the headmistress turned to me and said, now just forget that you're a doctor, take off your white coat, and remember that we know best about your child. I was astounded. How could she think she knew best about my child? How? You know, I had questions. I would have liked their answers to my questions. I'm sure they had some knowledge that they could share. She said, your child will never learn to speak, he will never do anything. Just get used to it.
There's a similar one here that I just wanted to... Oh, actually, I'm going to pop this one on first and then we'll pop back. So this is a mother, Caroline, whose son has quite a rare chromosomal disorder. And he is non-verbal, has quite severe physical impairments. And she just talks nicely, I think, about the idea of that equal partnership between a healthcare professional and a parent. Oh, God, sorry.
I think taking their time with parents. I had one consultant, a very senior consultant, who every appointment would just, for a second, just say, and how are you? And he was so kind, and we built such a good relationship and trust. I think it's taking the time just a little bit of kindness, bit of understanding that even if this parent looks quite together, chances are they've been up in the night, they're struggling with diagnosis, they're really under pressure. And I think recognising that the parent is the expert in their child, you're the expert in your field, but together you both want the same thing. So building a relationship together so that if tests and operations are needed, you've both got trust in each other. And I think that makes the whole process a lot easier.
And I really like what she said there about the parent is the expert in their child. And I think that's a key for us throughout our course, is that the parent spends 23.5 hours a day with this child. The healthcare professional may have 30 minutes. That does not make the healthcare professional an expert in that child in any way. So listen to the parents, listen to their context. And that's been echoed by a lot of mothers, which has been great. Now, this is a mother in, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here, Recife, whose child has congenital Zika syndrome, microcephaly, and I don't actually know what she's saying. I've been told it's about communication, so I'm hoping that's what it's about. But you tell me, it might not be about that in the site.
Eu gostaria de falar tanto para os médicos quanto para os outros profissionais de saúde que eles tivessem um olhar mais humano, né, para o seu paciente, para os familiares do seu paciente, principalmente para as mães, porque tem aquela história, quando uma mãe diz, quando a mãe sente, deve ter algum pouquinho de verdade ali atrás. Entendeu? Porque eu senti, desde o primeiro momento que eu vi que esses casos de Zika aparecerem, eu comecei a sentir que tinha alguma coisa errada com minha filha. Mesmo eu olhando para ela e não vendo característica nela que eu tinha nas outras crianças, mas eu sentia que tinha alguma coisa errada com minha filha. Né? Porque antes eles se baseavam pelo perímetro cefálico, que era 33 centímetros. E minha filha nasceu com 33 centímetros. Mas ninguém questionou, porque ela não tinha aparência. Eles foram pela aparência externa e não procuraram internamente. Se eles tivessem pego todas aquelas crianças que nasceram com aquele perímetro, durante toda aquela época, aquele período, tivesse feito uma tomografia, um exame de imagem, eles teriam descoberto tantos diagnósticos precoces. Minha filha já poderia estar andando hoje, estar correndo, né? Coisa que ela não conseguiu, ela foi impedida por conta da negligência dos médicos, da ignorância, do deixar de escutar, de ouvir, de achar que sabe tudo, entendeu? Então eu acho que eles deveriam ter mais empatia com seus pacientes, e principalmente com as mães, porque o coração de mãe fala, e quando fala tem razão.
Was it about communication? Or somewhat about that? But we've done maybe 7 or 8 interviews with parents such as this.
And it's very interesting because she says about diagnosis and how she should perceive earlier or before any specialist that there was something going wrong with her child. And if we go and see the research, edge research now, we know that images are much more effective. And if we had screened with images at that time, the possibility of starting right away the development for those children would have been very important and different. And so that's a very good piece, including for the diagnosis part.
Okay. Wonderful. So yeah, that gives you a kind of a sense of the videos we're getting for parents, and if you want to be using these yourselves and translating, it gives you a real sense of those perspectives that you can give healthcare professionals.